All right. Welcome, everyone. I want to introduce you to our speaker, and I'm using a new feature I'm very excited about called it's a teleprompter. Good morning, everyone. I want you to think for a moment about a question. What do young people around the world actually dream about? What problems are they trying to solve? And what do they want adults to know? Our first keynote speaker has spent his career answering exactly those questions. Howard Blumenthal is an Emmy and Peabody Award winning creator. You may know him from Where in the World Is Carmen Sandiego, but his most important work is happening right now. He leads Kids on Earth, a global initiative that interviews young people across continents about their ideas for reimagining learning in our connected world. What makes Howard's work so relevant to Glow is that he's centering the very voices our conference celebrates. Youth as change makers and leaders. His forthcoming book, it's published from Harvard Education Press, explores how students' perspectives can fundamentally reshape education worldwide. In a world where we often talk about young people, Howard is listening to them. So if you're here because you believe your students have something important to teach the world, that their voices matter, then Howard's keynote is going to spark something in you. Please welcome Howard Blumenthal to Glow. Welcome, Howard. We're so glad to have you here.
It's so good to be here. Hi, everybody.
Before we get started, I want to let everybody know there are a couple of polls in the stage under the polls tab, and we would love for you to take a look at those polls and respond to them so Howard knows who's in the room. I'm going to take a look right now and give you a little bit of an inkling of what we're seeing so far, Howard. Great. I'm going to go into the stages, and hopefully my sound will not reverberate and I can see what's going on. There we go. Stop that. Okay, so on our poll so far, we've got, let's see what we've got so far. I'm going to show the results. Okay, Howard, we've got several people in South America, North America, and Europe. I think it must be, and one person from Africa has just weighed in. Most of the people that are weighing in are teachers. 33% are teachers, 16% are school administrators, and 25% are NGO or nonprofit workers so far. So we'll let people weigh in on that. And it looks like teachers are our main audience here today. Anything else you'd like to know, Howard, about our audience so far?
Oh, all sorts of things. But the way we're gonna do this is I'll speak for a while, and then we'll all get to know one another. So we'll go through questions during. I'll talk for a while, then we'll do some questions, then I'll talk some more, then we'll do some more questions. So this is very much not quite interactive, but very participatory.
Okay.
Because I only know so much, and you guys are in the classroom every day, so.
We'll turn it over to you, and I'll come back on and we'll talk about the survey at the end too. Okay.
Great.
Take it away, Howard. Thank you for being here. Oops.
Let me kind of begin before the beginning, if you will. So growing up, I was in New York City. I was in New York City public schools. My dad was producing a network television show, of all things, a game show called Concentration. And that was my childhood. I learned by watching other people do a lot of work, and I was at NBC probably for 100, maybe 150 days during my childhood, so quite a lot. And my father brought stories home about how television operated. And this is not an era when television was, 150 or 500 or 1,000 channels or streamed. This was 3 networks. So if you were at home watching, whether you were an adult, often a housewife, or you were a kid who was sick from school that day, you watched Concentration. And that learning experience for me, watching adults interact, watching them be at the top of their game. Remember, this is live television for the first bunch of years. And watching them have a really good time doing it was a really wonderful model for me. And because my public school classrooms in Queens, in New York, were somewhat similar, the teachers were very open. The curriculum wasn't too tight. We had a lot of freedom. So we learned about the space shoots. We learned about um, the elections. We learned about newspapers and the differences between the probably a dozen different newspapers in New York City at the time. So the world was really open to us in part because the teachers were given a lot of freedom. And as kids, we use that freedom and we encourage teachers to help us understand the world in ways that we don't do now. So in many ways, I feel that my 1960s education was probably a better model than what we use now, and there were certainly problems with it. So let's talk a little bit about that. So along the way, I created and produced a very popular public television series in the U.S. Called "Where in the World Is Carmen Sandiego?" It's based upon some very popular computer software. At the time we did this, households were just beginning, parents were just beginning to buy computers. So they wanted to know, and they would ask the teachers, what software should I put on the computer? The answer was often this geography game. And we turned it into something that was fun and crazy and silly and pretty memorable. It's often listed among maybe the top 5 children's television shows of all time, sometimes the top 2 after Sesame Street. And what was striking about that, which leads into this whole idea of having kids on Earth think about themselves as individuals as well as a global collective, was there was no real geography curriculum. I contacted, I reached out to geography teachers looking for an association, looking for a good global curriculum to help kids learn about the world. And basically what I was told is you'll have to make that up on your own. Light bulb goes off. Curriculum is something people make up. It's not law. It's not taxes. It's something that we concoct because we think we're doing the right thing. So we made up a curriculum, me and the non-educator staff. I'm not an educator at that point. I'm a producer, writer, author, syndicated newspaper columnist, and at one point stamp collector, which turned out to be pretty helpful, and a little bit of an atlas geek. I used to like board games that had big maps on them and stuff, but I also liked the other board games. So we made up a curriculum. We won a Peabody Award, which is the equivalent of the Pulitzer Prize. Very big deal. And we made PBS very proud. But more importantly, we became part of popular culture. People became interested in knowing the countries in Africa because they were watching an 11-year-old kid run on a 35-foot map trying to identify 10 of them, I think it was, in 45 seconds and plant a flag or plant a marker on each. And it was fun. We developed the show with kids. We did not develop the show on our own. I would go to schools. We'd play in the schoolyard. In one of the schoolyards, there was a giant map, and I asked the kids, "What do you do on this?" And they're like, "Well, we kind of play around a little bit." I'm like, "Well, let's try to invent something together." The together part of this is the key. The collaboration part of this is the key. The time for a teacher standing in front of a classroom with a list of things that the kids have to learn and will be tested on has gone. We just don't learn that way. We never really did. Maybe in the days when we, were training people to work in factories and everybody has to learn the same things. But now the essence of learning for everybody is learning what I want to know and figuring out ways to learn it. The list of what we do in school, not so good. Everybody doesn't need 12 years of math. Everybody doesn't need 12 years of that particular batch of sciences, but not all the other sciences. And there are hundreds of them. But the kids are interested because they're able to find out more. And they do that on their own. They do that through YouTube. They do it through talking to one another. To some extent, they do it through books. They observe, they explore. That's the way people learn. It's always been the way people learn. School is this concoction that we came up with because we felt that in order to have citizens of countries obeying a standard group of laws and a standard morality and ethics and all that, we invented this curriculum, and it has become bigger and bigger and bigger and more difficult to remember and less relevant. And that's where the ideas about the book begin. So in about 2017, I had been running a nonprofit that owned a television station, a public television station. So I was an executive, and before that, I'd been a producer. So I knew the media business pretty well, but I didn't know the learning business very well. So I thought, well, how do I learn? Well, why don't I talk to the people who are learning? Why don't I talk to kids? So I started going around the world and interviewing kids one-on-one. Tell me about your life. Tell me what it feels like to be you. What are your plans for the future? What are you thinking about? What do you think you ought to be studying? What are you learning on your own? Without any prepared questions, which is very important, video recordings. And you can find them if you just go to the Kids on Earth website, which is up above, wrong hand, up above. It's mirrored. And what I found was that almost everywhere I went, Brazil, Uganda, Slovenia, long list of countries. We love learning. We're not wild about school. We just don't think school has it right. We like the institution of school. We like the social interaction. We like that there are caring parents and caring teachers and trained professionals and facilities. We just don't understand why that this particular list of items that's on this curriculum is what we have to learn, because it just isn't what we need to know. So what do they need to know? Well, again, I'll ask them, and the answers seem to be, we'd like peace. We'd like people not to get hurt. We'd like fairness. That comes up a lot, almost in any country I've gone to, particularly in Brazil. We're not wild about this whole race thing and prejudice. We think that ought to go away. We're hoping that's something that our parents' generation had. We're really concerned about climate change. But the thing we're most concerned about is that adults aren't doing anything about it. So they know that this is becoming their problem. And yet they're stuck in a box all day long, not learning about climate change. They're stuck in a box all day long, learning things that adults tell them they must learn. And the teachers are kind of half-hearted about it, or many are. Why? Because they weren't the ones they signed up for the profession. You guys know this because a lot of you are teachers. You signed up to help kids learn. You certainly don't want to impose a 30-year-old learning on. You want them to succeed on their terms in their time. And that's not really the way school is designed. It's designed for mass education, mass distribution of common ideas so that everybody more or less learns the same things. That's not a good idea. What we want is diversity. What we want is a broad range of sciences that are encouraged by teachers who may know a lot less than the students do. And that's okay, because we have other means of learning, and we also should be tying community members and all of that into this so that the kids can learn much more on their own terms. But the role of the adult is not diminished, it's just changed. The idea of a stage on the stage and all of that, those days are gone. It wasn't very interesting when I was in school. Most of what I remember was participatory. I remember almost none of the curriculum. And I remember at that point, I'm thinking, well, maybe I could be an A student, but that would mean that I'd have to spend all my time learning things I don't care about. Probably better to be a B student. Everybody will be happy, maybe B plus, and then I can learn things I do want to know. That seemed novel at the time, doesn't seem so novel now. In fact, it was so novel that when I was in college in upstate New York, at the State University of New York, I went to the provost and said, I think what we're doing is wrong. I'm like 18 or 19 or 20 or something. He's like, well, okay, smarty pants, what do you think you ought to be doing? I don't think I should be sitting in a room with 30 people who don't know anything about Chaucer. I was an English major. and listening to them speak in Middle English rather badly and not understand anything that's going on. It seems to me I ought to have a better way to learn that, but I don't think a better way is to have 30 people who also don't know what they're talking about. And I don't think I should be forced, as I was, to take the Chaucer class in the first place. Well, what would you do instead? I'm like, well, I'm interested in John Steinbeck, American author. I'm interested in Arthur Miller, American playwright. I'm interested in, at that time, in Jack Kerouac and the whole Beat Generation thing. So it was a bunch of literature, a body of literature that I was interested in. And to my astonishment, the provost closed the door. I'm thinking I'm going to be in trouble because I was somewhat high visibility on campus. And it was actually the associate provost said, you could do this if you want to. I'm like, well, what do you mean? She said, you don't have to go to classes. I'm like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? She said, well, we have this thing called a directed study, but we don't tell students about it. I'm like, why wouldn't you? Because they might like it, and then we wouldn't be able to manage it. Okay, I sort of understand the logic of that. It's kind of loopy, but sure. Find a professor who will become your guide. I'm like, I don't think I need a guide. I think I'm reading Arthur Miller, and if I have questions, I'm happy to ask. But mostly, I don't want to be writing papers, and I don't want to be sitting through lectures. I just want to read the next play and try to understand it. And if I don't understand it, I'd like to read it again. She's like, yeah, okay, you could do that. You think you really have the discipline to do that? I'm like, I think that's the natural state, that I'm curious. And sitting in a room filled with 30 people who don't care about a subject that we're all supposed to be learning about sounds like the not natural state. And yet that's the model we use for school. So it's kind of bizarre the way we treat school as if it is the correct answer. Largely in writing the book, we've determined that it probably isn't the right answer, and that the right answer probably has a lot more to do with what we learn in what we call not school, which is all the stuff that school just doesn't do. Not in any negative way. The school can't really provide endless access to the internet and tons of information available by YouTube or websites or etc. School's not really designed for play on a large scale. If I want to play, I'm going to go out in my neighborhood and I'm going to play. I don't know that I want to get sweated up for 15 minutes of running around playing cage ball or something. But I think exercise, and we'll talk about that, is very important during the school day. I just don't know the way we did it makes much sense. A bunch of smelly teenagers. It's also television plays a huge role in learning, and parents and friends and activities and observation and scouts, all of that I put into the not school envelope. And I think we need to spend a lot more time learning how learning works in that area, because it's the predominant way that human beings learn throughout their lives. And then you get to, and we'll make this sort of the next part, if we don't use math and science and social studies, what would we do? And my answer to that, which I'm happy to explain in more detail, but I feel like I've already talked enough for a bit, looks more like your body, your mind, your life, our planet, or our countries and cultures. And from within that, I think there is a very, very limited number of fundamentals that everybody should know and learn throughout the years at a more sophisticated level. But I also suspect that most of the time should be spent by individuals in small groups who are guided and mentored and provided resources by a teacher who is no longer burdened with lesson plans or curriculum. I think we can get rid of about 75% of curriculum. And I'm getting that number from let's see if I can move in the right direction, from Bob Pianta, who is my co-author, who for 15 years or something was the dean of the School of Education and Human Development at the University of Virginia, one of the biggest schools and one of the biggest teacher factories, if you will, in that region. So I was very surprised when he said, I just think most of what we're trying to help kids learn or teach them, I'm always worried about that word, is irrelevant and really it's not meaningful. And then we load on tests to make sure they're learning things that essentially aren't all that important. So we'll talk more about that sort of fresh way of thinking about how we spend time in school and how do we organize it. But I've kind of given you a lot of information and been talking for 20 minutes. So why don't I stop? Why don't I do a little bit of listening? And Lucy, I hope we have some questions. And if we do, I'm happy to answer them, or comments or whatever.
We have some comments.
Okay.
And so first of all, people loved Carmen Sandiego. They remember it from their childhood. And it was interesting because I used the game when I was teaching, as a baby teacher, but just the generational aspects of that. Some of my colleagues here were in school, so lots of us have had different experiences with it. The other, you were talking about how students, engagement and motivation, and Ellen, who works with international schools, was talking about letting students lead their education process. And she went on to say that students must be involved in co-creating, and we need to stop doing school to them. And my take on this is, and I think you and I talked about this the other day, is when you have a large public school in the United States, and I can't speak for other parts of the world, it's hard to personalize that education and to really know your students. In the independent school world, in the international school world, there's attention to the whole child. And so it doesn't translate well to the factory model of public education in general. Right. So I think that's part of it. And then Ellen went on to say the lack of relevance to kids' lives is really key. So do you want to respond to what Ellen was saying a little bit?
Yep. Thank you, Ellen. I'm going to break it down in 3 different ways, and we talk about this in the book. We actually talk about it in a few different ways. There's relevance, there's utility, and there's purpose. And we're kind of weak in our current system, believing that, and I'm going to wrap some of what Lucy just said. It's easier to do this in a private school, but most people attend public school. And it's such an overwhelming number, not only in the US, but worldwide, that we really need to fix the public system. So with that, learning is personal. That's the first most important thing. If I'm not interested in something, I'm not learning it. But if I am interested in something, you can't keep me away from it. And I'll think about it during my dreams because I'm engaged, I care. But the second piece is learning is relational. So a parallel word to personal. If I like you, if I respect you, if you're my teacher, if you're my parent, if you're my friend, if you're on TV, you might turn me on to something. You might you might light a spark. And I may want to follow you the way I did my father. He had a big impact on me. He was the boss in this box that broadcast live, and then and tape later on, to tens of millions of people. It was quite a role model and quite a story. So the relationship matters, but you also need a practicality about it. You need to feel as though the way you're spending your time is actually worthwhile. And I think we've broken that contract with many, many, many kids all over the world. And we see that not only by 3rd grade, because the kids have plenty of other input, and remember, they're starting earlier now too, but very much in college and very much in that broken contract between, if you learn this in high school, you'll be able to earn a living, you'll be able to pay for college is a whole nother thing, but you'll be able to really benefit from college, and then there'll be jobs for you. And that isn't true. And it's becoming less true as we go. So the kids quite naturally are going, well, I'm watching my brother, my cousin, my uncle, my aunt go through this. They followed all the rules and they can't find work, or they can't make enough money. So all of this is very connected. And that's the reason why the book is structured as it is. We take it from growing up and how the worldview is formed by global, not local, more and more because of media. And then we take it all the way through how do humans make progress, which is, and we know that higher education is only a very small part of that. Maybe 1 in 3, maybe 1 in 4 people actually finish college. And when they do, heck, if you're an elementary school teacher, the distance between not going to college and going to college, that salary is not gap is not that big. There's a lot of work we have to do.
Yeah. Compounding this is, I think, kind of there's a backlash against a lot of different things in education right now, because we're expecting miracles and we're measuring the wrong things, which is a whole nother discussion.
Yep.
But I'm on the alumni board for my college, and so I'm closely watching what they're doing. And it's Beloit College, shout out to Beloit, and they're reimagining their curriculum because they want. I think liberal arts education has also gotten kind of a bad rap in
Yep.
terms of people are not being prepared for something specific, and parents want to see value for the money invested in college. So they're really trying to pair the best of liberal arts education, experiential learning, which is really the core, with skills that students can take and make themselves attractive to employers. And it's really interesting to watch. And they have to do this too because they're here in the U.S. There's a big drop in the potential number of students who could be enrolling in colleges.
Yeah.
So if you're not Harvard with a huge endowment, your school is probably, there are colleges that are closing every day. So, we do have leaders. So my question here is, we do have leaders who are saying, who are pushing students in high school to know exactly what they want to do and to go to college and be ready to major and to be ready to do all these things. And earlier, it seems like that's happening. How do we give kids some room to explore what they want to do and not have that set in stone and not have it be sounding so career and technical education oriented, I guess?
So we're going to go back to that chapter 1, growing up. So a lot has changed. There's a lot more information now available to many kids, not everybody. The ones who don't have internet, that's about a third in the world, don't have this advantage. But those who do can build a much clearer picture of what that future looks like, and they can do it when they're 8 or 9. You don't have to be 11. So on the one hand, there's a lot of information so you can build those hopes and dreams and direction and the path and the steps you need to take and the college you want to attend and all that. But not everybody goes to college. Only about 1 in 2 do. And once you start getting into, in the United States, lower income or different ethnicity, the number is smaller. But getting through college, in part because the financial system, at least in the US, is so wicked, it's very difficult to kind of latch onto, this is what I want to do and it's worth staying with it. So we have a dropout rate that's like 40% or 50% or something. So, but the piece that I'm going to transfer over to Africa is, okay, I've worked really hard. I've got my master's degree. We don't have an employment marketplace, and AI is taking away a lot of those traditional jobs. So if I've been good and followed math into auditing or into accounting or into engineering, what I'm finding already, or coding, is that those jobs aren't available. They have, some of them have just been erased already, and we're at the very early stages of AI. But a lot of the notion of who I am and who I'm becoming is wrapped up in this too. So, am I going to pick my gender when I'm 8 years old? I might. Kids have been given enormous permission to become themselves and to be the best version of themselves they could possibly be. But with 2 working parents and other concerns of the household, they have to go beyond the parents and grandparents, that's the tradition, in order to get that information and to try to figure out where they fit in. So I've spoken to many, one in Greece who's in the book, Rosa, and another in West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia. And both of them have said, listen, I'm about 18. I'm really smart. I'm really capable. I've done a lot of stuff. I've won awards that students win. And I'm, in one case, a pretty serious musician. But Rosa is like, hey, my choice of gender just doesn't play in Greece. I have to leave. I have to go somewhere else to this very rich life, and her mom agrees with her. So in the case of the other, he's in the book, but I'm not remembering his name. He's looking at his computer screen going, I am moving to Seattle. And I think he knew that when he was 13. Why? Because there's employment. The streets are safe. He's not necessarily worried about being kidnapped, which is a real concern because of the drug trade. He's very concerned in West Virginia because the old Union Carbide factory has polluted, the earth and the water, and he just feels like if he stays, he'll die. So that's a lot for somebody who's at that point, I think he was 18, but imagine being 12 years old and facing that. And so on the one hand, we're asking a lot of the kids, and then we're compounding it by saying, and by the way, you have to stay in school for 12 or 13 years or 10 in other parts of the world. We're going to feed you a whole lot of stuff that isn't relevant. It's going to be boring. It may or may not actually be important, but you have to pretend it is because we're pretending it is. And there's no guarantee you're going to have any employment as a result of it. You want to stick with this? Does it sound good? Doesn't sound good to me. And then we wonder why kids are having increasing mental health issues. Part of it is we're reporting it differently. But a big part of it is we're forcing them to do things they don't want to do day after day after day, not because they're lazy or because they want to play video games, because they want to learn things that are worthwhile. And we are depriving them of that opportunity. And I just think that's sinful. I just think that we as adults need to put our big boy pants on and say we're doing school wrong. And we could do school a whole lot better if we would pay attention to the kids, if we'd listen carefully to what they need and not impose upon them every single detail in a social studies curriculum that we know and they know they will forget typically within the hour after they're taught. If they're being tested, maybe 48 hours. But after that, the Ebbinghaus curve, and we've known about that since the 1800s, just drops down. And they'll never return to it again unless there's an occasion for those synapses to fire together. Yeah. But we need to understand brain. We need to understand brain science. We need to understand cognition. That should be part and parcel of every teacher's training, and it's not.
Oh yeah, absolutely, I agree.
But we don't know much about learning. We know a whole lot about doing school. But I was astonished at how much hard work I had to do to write chapter 2, a chapter about learning, because I assumed reasonably that what we were doing in school tracked what we know about how human beings learn. I was wrong. So now I got to find the real stuff. I found a cognitive science teacher, a scientist in outside Paris. So his books were really helpful. And then I spoke to a lot of university professors, and some would refer to a schism between educational psychology and cognitive science, or what becomes cognitive science, in about 1960, which seems sort of incredible to me because it's some time ago.
Yeah.
But we're not hitting it. We're doing it wrong. And the reason we wrote the book is to say, hey, listen, there are other ways to think about this, and we're ignoring them. And we're doing that. We're making that decision in a very, very expensive, short-sighted way. We need those kids to propel human progress. If they're not learning what they want, what they need to be learning, want to be learning, we don't make progress. And if we're cutting off immigration, which has been the US's secret formula for making progress, that's a huge problem. Now, we're staying in one place. Many other countries are stepping forward, but they don't have the resources or the infrastructure on a large scale that the US has had. Now, there's negatives to that too, but we need full participation by everybody, whether it's climate change or anything else. And we're not teaching that. We don't collaborate from one school to another. If there's kids in Belgium who are interested in something that kids in a town in Kentucky are interested in, we haven't built that bridge yet. We have the technology, but we're so afraid of having technology in the classrooms that we tell the kids not to use this very powerful computer that's in their pocket, but instead to put it in the bin.
Yeah, we're banning it now. There's this big backlash against
insane. It's just we've created all of this ability to gather knowledge, and we're not using it. In fact, we're scared of it.
I think there
Except
are
when we're
there
not in school. And
are,
when we're not in school, the kids use it all the time.
I do
There's
think that
something
there's some
wrong with this
projects.
picture. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are some projects that are happening that are trying to combat that, but not at the scale that we would like. And that this globally connected teaching and learning that I firmly believe in is taking a back seat here in the United States too.
Yeah.
We don't call it global citizenship education or whatever for a number of reasons. We talk about global competence, but I don't think everybody's familiar with that concept.
No.
In Europe, they've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
There's a wide body of research on global citizenship education and how it impacts things. And so we here in the United States have not taken that on. Anyway, there's so much I could unpack here.
Yeah.
One of the things that another independence or another international school person brought up was that, in all of this, there's still foundational knowledge that kids have to have.
Yes.
So and so Ryan pointed out, I'll put his comment up here, that, curricular design becomes so crucial, knowing when to open things up and letting kids explore more interests. This is this is the crux of it. And having teachers have some autonomy. I think in independent and in international schools, they have some autonomy to design their own curriculum, but it's becoming increasingly less. And I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world. Do teachers in France or Singapore or Kenya have the ability to design their own curriculum? Is that something that you see at all?
Well, all right. So most of the world's school systems are based either on US or UK, which is fairly rigid. When I look at the comment on the screen, curricular design becomes so crucial. No, learning design becomes crucial. I don't think curriculum is a good word to use in front of kids. So I move away from that, but let's talk about fundamentals. So I talked before about learning about our planet, our minds, our bodies, etc. Now, if we unpack and let's use our bodies. So step one, every kid has a body. Some of them work better than others. Some of them are big and small and different colors and all that. And not everybody has full use of everything in their body. And some people have really optimized that or believe it's important. And other people have some artificial parts of their body. And some rely upon devices of one kind or another to correct things. This would be one of them, eyeglasses, right? But there's a lot of examples of that. So step one, everybody's body is different, but we share some characteristics. The first is it's hard to replace the parts of the body. Most body parts can't be replaced, not yet. Which means if we are living longer, and kids know we're living longer, then they have to keep their bodies in reasonable shape. They can't screw them up because they can't replace them. That's a really important idea. Now, the problem is I don't really know much about my body. Well, every kid who goes to a public school ought to be able to clearly identify every muscle, every bone, every organ, what they do, how they interact, what the impact of food and fitness, exercise, stretching, all of that. But you can't do that in one blast the way we would with curriculum. Instead, you have 12 years. So if you can feed them a few things every week for X number, for 10 years or whatever, they begin to develop a better understanding. Now, what you're going to teach a kindergartner might be different from what you're going to teach an 11th grader, but that word teaching, I use very judiciously. I think there are fundamentals, we call them, and I think those fundamentals should be developed by governments and by communities and by kids and revised every year. And there ought to be a list of those, and they should be publicly available, but they should change. So when we look at heart, and heart is an example I use a lot, and it's something that we do in the book as well, chapter 4 or something like that. What do I know about my own heart? I think it has something to do with pumping blood. I'm not completely sure whether it also cleans the blood. I think that's like the liver or the kidney or something a little further south. Um, the heart can get screwed up. It can miss beats, for example. So I know it beats. I think it's a pump of some sort, but I don't really have that as clear as I could, right? But my dad, before he passed away, had a part of a pig put into his heart, a valve. Not, I don't really know exactly where that is or how it worked, but at the moment, at the moment when that was happening, I could draw a clear diagram. It was important to me. And as it turned out, a friend from high school and a friend from professional years both had that same operation. It's called TAVR, TAVR surgery. Now, a small number of people are going to be very interested in that, but most people won't. Somebody else, and I've done this with kids to kind of get a sense of, what would you want to learn? Well, I want to know about falling in love. Okay, I mean, that's part of the heart thing too. You should explore that. So, are we sure that the heart doesn't? Is that just a fantasy, or is that reality? Does the heart think? Do other parts of the body think, or is it all in the brain? I think it's distributed. I think the brain does a lot of the work of coordination, but every kid develops curiosities based upon the fundamentals that we feed them maybe once a week. And they should do that in all 10 learning categories, we call them. Don't like the word subject because then you're subject to somebody else's wishes. I like learning categories because it puts the control in my hands. So I started developing, what would you do if you wanted everybody to know a lot about their bodies? And why would you do that? Well, the answer is we could have the most knowledgeable population of people on earth in terms of their knowledge of how their body works and how they can keep it healthy than we've ever had in the history of humanity. That's a pretty good goal, and it's achievable. But most of the learning has to happen by the kids. There's a problem. The teacher can only do so much, and we want the teacher to be free to help the kid who thinks about love, or help the kid who thinks about tachycardia, or bradycardia, in a word that I just learned. So how do you do that? Well, you have to free the teacher up. It can't be part of a science class. It has to be what they do for 1 hour a week. And the kids have to have their afternoons free and scheduled to some extent so that they can learn what they want to learn. But they may want to learn it in different ways. They may want to learn it by talking to a local doctor. They might want to learn it by spending a couple of days in a hospital, as an observer. They may want to learn it by watching YouTube videos. There's nothing wrong. We need to take every available resource and point it to learning, and we need to get communities to go for it.
There's
So
here
it's
in the
not
here in
just
the here in the US, the parents are part of the issue too. So I live
and part of the solution.
yeah. They could be, but we're not educating the parents about what this looks like and setting the context, the longitudinal context for them.
My
And
father had no clear idea of what I was doing in school every day, but I learned more from my father and my mother than I did from any teacher. And I'm sure I'm not the only one in this conversation for whom that's true. So Peggy,
so she's talking about how we educate our teachers. How do teachers choose becoming, teacher as coach? She's talking here. She also mentioned that she comes across many adults who don't know how to listen to students, and they still think adults are superior.
yeah, most adults, I would say, almost all adults, and we could even extend it to that. The number of times when I was very actively going from country to country and school to school, I never interviewed a kid without having an adult in the room somewhere. Because I'd have to look going, kid just said that. Are we okay with that being recorded? Because I don't know. But it was just the right way to do it. Very often the principal would come by and say, I don't know how you're getting the kids to say all this. You know more about these kids than I do now. You've been here a half hour. You've been here for 1 day. Like, well, have you ever just sat down and talked to them as people? Like, have you ever just said, so what are you thinking? A lot of stuff happened yesterday. What's on your mind? And the number of principals who have said, good idea. It's like, well, it's not that they're foolish. It's not that they're ignorant. They don't have time. because this curriculum monster has eaten every available moment so that we don't have the time to think about what the kids are all about. So it's a balance. I mean, adults know a lot. We have a lot of experience, but we also flaunt it in ways that are really obnoxious. Kids know a lot too, but they're a little reluctant because they don't want to get into a conversation with an adult who's going to tell them they're wrong. So they talk about them. They talk among themselves. They talk on social media, but that relationship is very broken. It's broken and also adults are busy and they're not trained to take on a lot of what, in when I was growing up, it was the new math, but whatever. My mom would look at it going, I can help you with math. I don't know what the heck this is. I don't know what a number line is. That's going to be you're going to have to figure that out from somebody else. So I'd go and talk to other students. And they're like, okay, here's how it works. You got positive here. You got negative here. This is what a coordinate grid looks like. Like, okay, would I use that? And the kid would be like, I don't know. We're just supposed to know it for the test. So in my life, and I'll ask everybody else, how valuable have number lines been in your life? Because for me, I'm good with yeah, it's a negative number. I'm okay. Anybody else, actually, if you're not a math teacher, just anybody, you want to throw a poll up and see?
I think they were helpful when I was teaching, first graders math, and we had a little tape on our desk that they could look at. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely the relevance of curriculum is an issue.
Yeah, for a very small number of people, it's really important, but for everybody, not so much. It's about Eric says it's about the user experience, and the users are the students. I think the users would be a lot more engaged if they were learning things they cared about or could be encouraged to care about. I just don't know that, learning lots of math is great for your brain and your ability to be able to solve problems and all that. Yeah, that's true for any subject, though. It's just that math teachers now have it on their sweatshirts.
So there are people presenting at the conference that I think fit this bill. I'm thinking of a school in Virginia. Jenny, I think she's presenting right after this, I think, and she's presenting with a student. And I'm blanking right now because I'm frazzled. But there are people who are presenting some of this stuff, and I think examples of places that are able to do this, I think you can find in your book, and I think are really beneficial to people. They need to be able to point to use cases, I think, in general.
In very general, right? Because once we start looking at, well, there's an exemplar school, that means everybody else does. Yeah, what's my North Star? Sven is asking.
Yeah. I will add one thing too. The other thing about the United States is that we're not looking at other countries. We look at Finland in particular and say, oh, we want to be like Finland, but then we never take the ideas and actually put them into the implementation at scale. I want to say individually, but and the
kids, the kids reflect that too. In interviewing kids from the U.S., far less exposure to other countries aside from I want to go to Germany because I saw a basketball team or something, or a football team. So what's the North Star for Kids on Earth? I think step one, I just want to get everybody in the system, from kids through the policymakers, including teachers, to talk about this. To, number one, say, what's it like growing up now? Is it different from the way my experience, my own experience 30 years ago? Number two, does the way we do school, the subjects, the organization, the curriculum, the testing, does it make any sense at all? What if we just pour all the liquid out of that cup? The next is, let's recognize, fund, study all of the wide range of activities and acknowledge that not school is the most dominant way of learning in the world and always will be. And then let's start looking at what that curriculum, that new school ought to be, using learning categories, using fundamentals, using personal learning, personal education. And how does all that affect the way that adults think about themselves? So Sven, my North Star is get the discussions going. And I should say, number one, go to the website, because a lot of this stuff is talked about there, including much in kids' voices. But number two, you'll get a sense of what the book is about, and there's some free chapters you can sign up for if you like, and grab the book. But I also am very, very open to working with school districts and having these conversations and leading them if necessary, because I know that I'm not in the center of the circle. I'm not an educator. I'm somebody who's asking a lot of questions and has some ideas, and fortunately, a co-author who, does have a very close adherence to the education system, and also thinks this is not a good way to do it. So there we are. But yes, absolutely, get in touch with me. You can, on the Kids on Earth website, and I'm happy to have other conversations, particularly with kids, by the way.
So what's next with this? What's your plan? You're on your book tour, your virtual book tour. What do you want people to do with this book? Do you want people to use it as an author study, with leadership teams? How do you want this to be
Yeah,
leveraged?
great question. I think number one, it's use the book to sharpen your own ideas and to get conversations going with other people, particularly those who aren't bought in. Like just talking, preaching to the choir is not really going to get us there. Expose it to kids. Start with the older kids. You can work your way down. But I don't think sixth graders would have much trouble grasping most of the concepts here, or fifth. So, we have that piece. But what I really want to do is work with high level government officials to say, top down, how do we give schools permission to do this? And how do you manage the parents and the press and all that? And at the same time, working with teachers and students at the district level. So I think it's necessary to go top down and bottom up. And the book is a toolkit for doing that. But we finished the book over a year ago, so I know a lot more than I did before, and I'm a little bit more of a troublemaker now. Maybe I feel like I have a little permission, but we wrote the book to give people permission to think this way, because often it's like, I can't do this. It's not the way school works. It's like, well, maybe you're right and school's wrong. So that's a lot of the thrust of it, I think.
Yeah, I think we need to bring this back into the conversation in schools, and I think it's been waylaid because of the pandemic, and now we're having a backlash to some of the practices that happened during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's also an excuse.
Yeah, and I think the most inspirational school leaders that I've come across are trying to push their schools forward no matter what. Um, and so I think of a lot of the schools in Digital Promises, League of Innovative Schools. I think of some of the schools that are highlighted in Hundreds, collection of innovations and that sort of thing. But we need more of that. We need it at scale, and we need to get people inspired to revisit this.
So I have a question and I'm hoping somebody will jump in. Just
Yeah,
quickly.
we got to wrap up soon. So
Okay.
let's have this
Does
final
this
question.
if you're in a country other than the U.S., how does this resonate? And we need more troublemakers, says Ryan. But what I'm talking about, am I very U.S. centric? What pressing challenges continue to unfold in our community? How do we respond with wisdom and compassion? My answer, I guess, Reverend Dr. Starbellino, is read the book, get in touch with me if you want. We can talk more about that. But without having a guide, a manual, I don't know where you go. So we tried to organize current thinking to make sense of this. But please get in touch, go to the website, tell other people this exists, and let's get together and talk about it. That's sort of the point of all this, and the point of having all this technology that lets us do it. So let's use it. Lucy, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. This is the perfect start to our conference, because I think these are the themes and the questions that we can talk about throughout the next day. And a lot of I think a lot of the sessions will address this, and people like Jennifer Klein, who is a featured presenter, her work is totally in line with what you're saying. So I hope that people will continue this and think about what Howard has to say and purchase his book. The other thing I would say is you can reach out to Howard through his website, but you can also reach out to him through the conference platform, and he'll get an alert
Right.
And you may see him around in conference rooms as we're going through the conference tour. So please, please, please reach out to him, connect him on LinkedIn, purchase the book, and let's keep the conversation going and see how we can take the seeds of these ideas and plant them so that they grow. Thank you,
Thanks,
Howard,
Paul.
for being here. Really appreciate this. Love the conversation. Love the comments from everyone. And we definitely need more troublemakers, good troublemakers. So let's keep doing it throughout the conference. And next hour, we have a couple featured speakers. One is Jenny Finn, who I mentioned earlier in her school, and she's presenting with a student. I need to go help them get on stage. So I'm going to end the stream right now, but in about 5 minutes, we're going to get the next set going on the featured speaker stages and also the Spanish stages. And there's also a couple sessions as well. So we'll see everyone in a few minutes. And thanks again for being here, everyone. I appreciate this, Howard, and we'll talk again soon.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
That was awesome.